Techno-Hyperhumanism. And perhaps, Carl, you can explain to us all about what that topic is about.
Yeah, it's actually Eddie that's going to start, and I believe he is ready. So please feel free to share your screen, Eddie, and then I will do the second half of the short presentation.
Well, hello everyone. Is the volume too loud? Is everything okay?
You're a little bit quiet, Eddie. If you can turn up the volume at all,
Okay.
maybe.
What about this?
Yeah, or just speak loudly. That would be good.
Okay. Well, I'll try to speak as loud as I can. Um, can you listen, everyone?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, thanks everyone for joining us this event. We're going to talk a bit about hyperhumanism. Carl Smith and I have been working on this theory about how humans have been suffering a decay due to mostly technology and the way we've been using that. And we have been trying to create a framework that takes us into a new evolution for the human being. So I'm gonna share this slide with you. Uh, we're gonna talk about hyperhumanism. Okay, first of all, we have to say humanity has advanced a lot. We have been able to create such amazing technology that it has taken us to even look through the clouds of Jupiter. We have been able to explore the whole world, the whole continents and stuff. And we can feel that we are a very advanced civilization because we have been able to accomplish so many special things. The difference between the rest of the animals is mostly the neocortex, which is this part of the brain which, the wrinkled part that looks like a sausage all rounded up. Well, 90% of our brain is made of the neocortex, and it's the neocortex, the one which allows us to talk, to reason, to use logic, and to be conscious. And it also handles the superior mental functions. So this little difference in the brain has allowed the human civilization to advance a lot. But there's a problem with all of this, this is what I call the human failure. The human failure is all about the things that we have doing all wrong. Currently, the human failure is very, very visible through means of corporate greed and abusing government connections to accomplish illegal things that will leave them a lot of money. And it's funny because a bunch of these people can make whole humanity go haywire. It's like they are insisting on enslaving us, and we're just here accepting technology and using it as if it was an obligation for us. And I mean, that problem has existed forever. There's always someone who's trying to oppress anyone else. But this is not the main problem. Let's talk about the origins of man as a corrupt being. Uh, I guess some of you probably have heard about Popol Vuh, which is a sacred book of the Mayans. There's this very interesting part about the creation of man, which actually I like to call the origin of corruption. It's very interesting because the gods tried to create a human so it would adore the gods. So they created these humans so we can be below them. And they tried to make these humans out of different materials. First, they tried making humans out of sticks, then clay. They tried corn, then corn and a heart, until they finally, the gods decided to ditch the humans up. Like, well, we don't actually need humans. So they decided to bury the bones in the Mictlan, which is the land of the dead for the Mayan cosmogony. And Quetzalcoatl went there and took them out. When he came out, the gods killed him. The guy tripped down, and the skeleton was all scattered in the floor. So the bones were picked up by squirrels and birds. And when Quetzalcoatl comes back from the dead, he realizes that the skeleton for the human being is all corrupt, actually, and it's all beat up, and bones are missing and stuff. When he asks his Xolotl, which is his companion dog, about what to do next, the dog tells him, "Well, if you started, then go ahead and finish it." So this is actually a very interesting lesson because it tells us that the human is actually corrupt by nature. But I mean, so this is what I call the human failure. We have been trying to develop all these kinds of technology, but we haven't advanced in terms of human evolution, in terms of empathy, in terms of working on a globalized community that actually works for everyone and not just for a bunch of people. So, well, where did we go wrong? Let's talk about this. This is what I call the WWWWWWW, and it's quite a mess. Hopefully, we can explain it a little bit better. The first contemporary problems arose with the Wild West, which is the first couple of W's, which is the origin of contemporary predatorial societies, meaning that in the Wild West, everyone was able to go ahead, kill anyone, and just grab ahead and pick the land. So this is where everything starts in America, mostly. Then it comes the World War II. This is understanding war as a business. I mean, so many bankers started financing both sides of the war. So we understood war as a business, and that's the way how the United States of America actually works. I mean, they usually spend their time in war because they know war means business, and business, well, it means money. Then we come to Wall Street, where we take capitalism as the origin for mass manipulation. People who want to sell more, people who want to, oh yeah, to sell more of their products and services they are offering, are taken as leaders or as preachers. So now we have advertisement, and we see the local clerks on the stores as if there were the preachers for these new churches that sells us products that we don't actually need. And finally, the World Wide Web, which is the final way to dumb us down, which is basically hyper communication with no content. I mean, we're having useful content right now, but most of the internet is full with useless content. I mean, it's there's no imagination there. So what's happening? We're approaching an age of neo-oscurantism. That's what I call it. This is by making people choose entertainment over culture. All these devices are dumbing us down, but by making forget us about memory, no pun intended, and obviously by making us forget about our sense of ubiquity and our mental math capacities. But most of all, people are focused on form over depth. People have become very superficial. Plus, it's super difficult if to get to do something deep when we are facing this problem of neo-oscurantism. So basically, this takes us to hyperhumanity. Actually, we need a new kind of human. This is not about survival. This is about evolution. And of course, Carl is going to talk to you a little bit more about what hyperhumanity means and what means we use to achieve it. But first of all, I just want to leave a little bit of intro. This is what hyperhuman means to Carl and I, which is a human being capable of augmented perception, which is able to read many things just by using his natural senses. Augmented cognition, which means having a very bold and improved mental state. Augmented consciousness, which is what we're going to talk about consciousness in a second. Remote viewing, bilocation, telepathy. I mean, think Pythagoras. Pythagoras was very famous because he was able to be in two places at once at the same time. That's amazing. I mean, that's just history. I don't know how they made it. But we still have a long way to go to reach there. First of all, to reach, for example, a hyper society made of hyperhumans, we would need to, well, remember a little bit about this TV series. In this TV series, they showed a hyper society. It was inclusive. There were people from all races. There were Klingons, Ferengis, Borgs, humans, even robots. Second of all, you didn't have any need for money. Why? Because everyone was doing their job. So why would anyone need money? If everyone has its own merit, which is the third point, based on merit, based on what you are doing, right? Oh, you were missing all my slides. I'm sorry. I had slides for this and I forgot to send them to you. Well, and of course, it's individual growth based. I mean, it's about how one person grows to its own potential towards a community driven goal. I mean, these people were working for whole society, for the world, a whole bunch of planets. But there's a problem first. We need to be conscious about ourselves. And that's the most difficult part about it because most people aren't able to be conscious. For example, to reach hyperhumanism, we have to reach a conscious humanism first, which implies a balanced rationality and emotions, which implies being knowledgeable, idealistic, and empathic, which means above human. Most humans are in this way. So basically, we need to make this little step of being conscious before going into hyperhumanity. We have been developing this conscious development framework, which we presented in the paper we wrote, which talks about three levels of consciousness. The first one is about yourself, who you are and what you care about. The second is awareness of yourself, which basically means where's your place in the universe and the place for other persons in the universe or other elements and objects. The third one is consciousness of yourself. I mean, that's the influence you can hold on others and vice versa. And this is very interesting because most people talk about consciousness, but this framework will allow you to work gradually, progressively, until you finally reach it. And well, basically, I have to ask you, what are we guys waiting for? I mean, achieving a new state of humanity only requires a first step, and this is consciousness. And this is something we can achieve right now. We can do it right now. We have to wait for no one. So yeah, I would like to ask you guys, what are you waiting for? So thanks for your time. I'm leaving you with Carl. He's gonna explain a little bit more about hyperhumanity, and well, hope to see you later. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow in the workshop.
Thanks, Eddie. That's really helpful. Right, I'm gonna share my screen. 1 second. If you stop sharing, Eddie, that'd be great.
I forgot my slides. I'm
That's
sorry,
okay.
guys.
You can show
Slides
them.
were
Show
very
them.
beautiful, but well, it's important what you read.
You can show them again in the workshop tomorrow. Okay,
Sure.
so just to jump in on this, so let me just share these. So yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the background of mine and Eddie's work together. So last year I was lucky enough to present with this young man who is the director of engineering at Google, one of the biggest transhumanists on the planet. And he's trying to keep himself alive with all these supplements. Ray Kurzweil is famous for this idea of wanting to live forever, killing the sort of the basic principles of the organism, which is a death cycle, life and death cycle. So humanism, let's define humanism. So it emphasizes the value and agency of human beings, individually and collectively. Transhumanism focuses on human enhancement, where humans are still considered the most important species. But this is not always intelligently used, but can lead to what we're focusing on, which is this idea of post-humanism and hyperhumanism. So this is about deconstructing the human, understanding that the human condition is not a fixed but an open notion, which allows for the idea of perceptual persistence, so that changing things over time, not just having this constant gimmicky altered states and chasing your own tail of peak experiences, but actually making altered traits. So some of the key aspects of what hyperhumanism is, humans are no longer seen as the most important species, and I think that's a big issue, that we are so completely convinced that we deserve to be destroying all the other species. And there's not just one type of human, but many types of self, many types of human. And also it's this idea of allowing us to see that we are in an interconnected, nested ecology. So this idea of a pluralist way of seeing things. And I really want to bring in that we're not just talking about humans when we talk about hyperhumanity. I think it's about understanding that everything has its own Umwelt, everything has its own way of experiencing and seeing the world, the same world. So humankind is not woven the web of life. We are but one thread within it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. All things are bound together, all things connect. The deer isn't crossing the road is crossing the forest. And I think that that's the thing, that we need to move away from this idea where we think that we're at the top of the food chain to this idea where we're part of the food chain before we destroy literally everything around us. So, examples like this, where this artist doesn't think we're going to evolve into cyborgs, he thinks we're going to devolve into animals, and he's already preparing to be a goat. So how do we really, coalesce? How do we really connect to animals? Is it through technology? Is it through these sorts of interfaces which give us these compound eyes? Um, is it through, this there's a whole history in philosophy looking at what is it like to be a bat? How can we really experience other species? And I think this is a key part of hyperhumanity, really plugging into what it is like to be something other. And this guy from the Trans-Species Society, Joe, he's already installed this echolocation directly into his senses. So not using VR to sort of simulate it, but actually just going ahead and plugging this sense into his system. And again, this is, transhumanism, because transhumanism is a dependency on technology to have that sense. Hyperhumanism is about using a technology in order to create a new sense, but then you remove the technology, much like stabilizers on your bike. You actually remove the stabilizers after you get the new skill, and that's where we're looking at technology. So this is a great friend of mine, Rodrigo Montenegro, and his Gamma Wave Technologies company. This is the key sentence. If Musk's Neuralink aims to improve human cognition, my hope is not that we get to a point where in technological development where we need implants to boot our brains, but to use technology to be empowered by it, to empower consciousness to overcome technology, not become dependent, expanding our abilities and senses beyond what we think is normal, even possible, and the emphasis on being back in nature. So utilizing the analog skills as well as the digital. So I've done a whole lot of talks at EVA before. One of them was about context engineering. So a lot of this technology is very transhumanist. It's about dependency. You can't have the skill without it. 360 vision, for instance. Unlikely that you would take that device off and then have 360 vision. Moon Rebus, who's a second part of the Cyborg Nest crew, and initial Cyborg Nest crew, she's created a sense that enables her to feel the Earth. She's got a seismic sense, so this vibrates every time there's an earthquake in the world, and she's then able to connect to the Earth in a way that nobody else is. So the bigger the earthquake, the more her arm vibrates. So to distinguish again the two differences between the hyperhumanism and the transhumanism, one of the senses from Cyborg Nest is the North sense. So again, their tagline is we don't want to wear technology, we want to become technology. So this is a permanent installation, this thing that vibrates every time you face north. Whereas the Feel Space Belt is a hyperhumanist example because it's something you wear for 6 to 8 weeks, you take it off, and you have that sense of north. So how can we build in these things? So we're also learning not just from the animal kingdom, but also from much more intelligent species, the mycelium. Mycelium, has survived 5 mass extinctions, and we're causing the 6th. So how can we learn from a more intelligent species that we could argue has a larger consciousness, primarily because they generate mutual beneficial relationships. When they're in abundance, they share automatically to whatever's around them. And how can we be more like that? What is it that we're lacking, and that we constantly feel the need to have an abundance of everything in order to, you can't have 2 lunches. You can't, there's only a certain amount of things that you can consume in one life in 1,000 months, which is all a human life is, 83 years. Humans of the past were much more intimate with their ecosystems. And if we are to survive the climate changes before us, we must reacquaint ourselves with the more than human life that lives beyond the concrete and the computers that define modernity. So again, understanding death. I think our death literacy is really poor because death is a taboo. How do we understand that when we die, we are food for the next round of life? This is a great quote from my collaborator on the Context Craft project. I want to be eaten by a mushroom house that I have grown. I want to be food, and I want to be habitat. This is hyperhumanism in effect. So we imagine how it feels to be a character in a book. Why can't we imagine how the land feels? Can we create not just necessarily digital technologies, but can we create our own internal technologies that will enable us to connect to our environment? And we're so disconnected at the moment. So a brilliant book that's just come out from Chris Backer is this book, LSD and the Mind of the Universe. And in that book, he has taken incredible protocol where he did 23 years of experiments. He took 73 high dose LSD trips, and he went through a massive journey. And it started with him experiencing his own life and rebirth and death. And then he went through a next phase into the sea of despair. And then he went and experienced the death of humanity as a whole. And then he ended up in Plato and in the archetypes. And then he went beyond the archetypes and ended up experiencing this new future human, which he said was just incredible. And then he went beyond the future human to what he called the absolute light. So he experienced over 23 years an incredible experience of experiencing the hyperhuman. So I just want to finish with some of the techniques that we're going to potentially cover in the workshop tomorrow at 4 o'clock, 3 until 5. So a 2-hour workshop in the afternoon, which Eddie's going to lead on. But breathing, I mean, breathing techniques are so profound, and there's so many things that we can do with the breath. Peripheral vision exercises, I've mentioned conscious dying. You know, the ancient mystery schools had it right that we needed to face this death and kill the taboo and understand that the dead tree is an ecosystem of new life. The fourth one, perceptual flexibility through perspective shifting. I mentioned in my talk yesterday about double consciousness, this idea of triple contexting. So asking the same questions through 3 different contexts at the same time. Also the importance of forgetting. I think that we don't realize that we only really function through this ability to forget, and we're all completely obsessed with holding on to everything all the time, and we're in this massive glut. Peak stuff is a big thing. Peak, like, just having too much information, too much content. And I think that's where the context engineering comes in, because we're moving into a new economy where we leave behind the content-based economy, which is frankly destroying the planet because we have a lack of resources, and we move into a context-based economy where we focus on our own perception and changing our perception as the new content. Fifth point, training in liminal spaces. So lucid dreams, out-of-body experiences, hypnagogic, hypnopompic states. These are really transformative states where we can actually generate them ourselves without technology, and we can train in these spaces. And there's reports that in lucid dream states, you can have 4 times more effective training, say if you're trying to do something like Tai Chi, because you have to apply the context in that space. So you have to apply gravity. The 6th point, cognitive diversity, using virtual reality to enter the umwelt of others. Mel Slater done these amazing VR experiences where you're inside a drummer's body and you're practicing drumming, and you get better at drumming because you're in a famous drummer's body. Also, this idea of the ecology of selves. So we talk about the multiple personality disorder as a big problem, but actually maybe that's where we need to go beyond the cult of the individual. That's completely we're in a cul-de-sac, and we're going to be much more in a cul-de-sac if we think that this fiction that is the individual is the be-all and end-all of our purpose here. And also reigniting the imagination. What techniques we will focus on tomorrow is encouraging daydreaming, downtime, slow movements like slow food. All these different slow movements are fascinating, and also not replacing imagination with computer animation. I mean, we're just completely in this visual paradigm where we're not able to really slow down. We're not able to meditate properly because we're just so overwhelmed. And then it's all about building declarative spaces rather than prescriptive spaces. So being in a space that you have the freedom to repeat what you're going through, rather than just being on a path that's been designed by somebody else. And then I mentioned already, dealing with otherness, holding hybridity and multiplicity, avoiding the generation of endless augmented escapism. Let's not go down the Ready Player One route where we're just inside a hikikomori world where everyone's logged out of society. I mean, we're seeing it already where we're all embedded in the matrix. We're all completely, totally addicted to our screens because we have to be in order to survive. We need to build mechanisms to avoid all of that. And finally, building consciousness literacy. I think it's our birthright in order to explore our consciousness. We're always robbed of that ability, through the media fear generation and the hacking of our attention, which is our consciousness. So if we can increase plurality, we can increase tolerance, and boy, do we need it. So tomorrow we will have that workshop. I'm going to put in the chat the link to register. We've got a separate Eventbrite registration. where we will be giving out lots of information both before and after the workshop. So thank you very much. I'm pretty sure we don't have any time for questions, but we'll have all of those in the workshop tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Can you put up both the morning workshop link and the afternoon